The wind screamed through the shattered village, rattling broken windows and sending loose shingles clattering across the muddy streets. Rain fell in relentless sheets, turning the cobblestones into slick mirrors that reflected the flashes of lightning above. Ilara pulled her thin cloak tighter around her shoulders, shivering as she trudged through the storm. Each step was heavy, soaked boots squelching in the mud. Her hair plastered to her face, she pressed on, even as the whispers of villagers cut through the storm in soft, cruel tones. Not worthy, never worthy. Her own mind echoed the words, the ones she had carried since the council had cast her out. As an Omega of the Northern Pack, she had failed a ritual meant to prove her strength, her spirit, her worthiness. The elders had pronounced her unfit, useless, and she had been forced to leave the only home she had ever known. Now in the pouring rain, she had nowhere to go. Thunder shook the sky, a deafening roar that made the forest edges tremble. Ilara looked up, letting her face lift to the storm. She felt small, insignificant, and yet there was a stubborn flame of defiance inside her. She would survive this. She had to. A sudden movement caught her eye, a shadow that did not belong to the rain or the wind. She squinted through the darkness and saw it, a massive shape limping through the mud toward her. Her heart caught in her throat. Wolves roamed the outskirts, yes, but this was different. It moved with purpose, each step heavy, deliberate. Its eyes, though hidden beneath fur matted by rain, glinted like molten silver, reflecting the flashes of lightning. Ilara froze. The instinct to run, so deeply ingrained from years of rejection and fear, screamed at her. And yet, something else held her in place. There was a pull she could not explain, a recognition deep in her chest that this creature was somehow tied to her fate. The wolf staggered closer, and she saw the blood streaking its fur. A deep cut along its flank leaked red into the mud. The animal faltered, low growls trembling from its throat. Fear and compassion warred inside her, but ultimately compassion won. "Hey," she called softly, her voice almost lost in the roar of the storm. Come here." The wolf hesitated, ears flattening, eyes wary. But it did not retreat. Step by step it moved closer until it collapsed a few feet from her, shivering violently. Ilara knelt in the mud, heart hammering. Carefully she extended her hand. "You're hurt. I'll help," she whispered. Her fingers brushed its soaked fur. The wolf flinched but did not run. She dragged it gently toward a broken shack at the edge of the village. Its body was heavy, heavier than she expected, but she gritted her teeth and pulled, her wet hair sticking to her face as rain soaked through her clothes. Finally, they were inside the shelter. The air was dank, filled with the smell of wet wood and earth, but it was safe, for now. Ilara knelt beside the wolf, examining the wound. Her hands were trembling, not just from the cold but from the awe she felt. This was no ordinary animal. The eyes that glimmered in the storm were intelligent, almost human in their depth. She pressed her palm gently against the wound, murmuring words of reassurance. "Hold on. You'll be all right." Lightning illuminated the room through the broken roof, casting shadows that danced across the walls. The wolf's eyes followed her every move, never blinking. She wondered if it understood her words. Perhaps it did. Perhaps it always had. Hours passed. Ilara worked tirelessly, tearing strips of her cloak to bind the wound, whispering to the creature as if it were a child in need of comfort. The storm outside raged on, the wind howling like a living thing, but inside the shack an uneasy silence settled between them. Two outcasts, thrown together by fate, sharing warmth against the world's cruelty. By dawn, the rain slowed to a drizzle, and the storm's fury softened into a steady murmur. Ilara leaned back exhausted, her hands raw from the effort. She watched the wolf now lying on the straw she had gathered, its breathing deep and steady. Its eyes met hers, and for a moment everything else disappeared. The cold, the pain, the endless rejection. There was only the creature and her, and an unspoken bond that neither fully understood. She smiled, a small, weary curve of her lips. "You're not going anywhere," she said softly. "Not while I'm here." The wolf shifted, lifting its massive head, and for the first time Ilara felt a shiver that was not from cold. Its gaze was intense, almost human, and it seemed to linger on her with a weight that pressed into her chest. Her heart beat faster, uncertain yet filled with a strange sense of relief. For the first time in her life she felt that maybe, just maybe, she was not entirely alone. Outside, the storm clouds began to break, revealing a pale, gray light that heralded the coming dawn. The village was still ruined, still empty and silent, but within the small shack a fragile sense of hope began to grow. Two beings rejected by the world had found shelter in each other's presence, and then, in the quiet moment just before the sun rose, the wolf moved in a way that made Alara's breath catch. It stretched, powerful muscles rippling beneath wet fur, and slowly it began to change. Its body grew taller, shoulders broadening, arms lengthening in a way that seemed impossible. The fur along its back receded, revealing skin that gleamed like wet stone. The wolf's face elongated into features that were both wolf and man, eyes still silver, still impossibly deep. Alara froze, her heart pounding, her mind struggling to comprehend what she was seeing. The storm outside had faded into a quiet drizzle, but the storm inside her chest raged stronger than ever. I don't understand," she whispered, voice trembling. The creature, no, the man-wolf, looked at her with those silver eyes. Intense and unreadable, his voice low and resonant rolled through the small shack like distant thunder. "You sheltered me," he said, "and now, you cannot leave me behind." The words were simple, yet they carried a weight that made Alara's knees weak. There was power in them and something else, something that stirred a longing she had never allowed herself to feel. Fear, awe, and curiosity collided in her chest, leaving her dizzy, trembling, alive in a way she had never known. Outside, the first rays of dawn broke through the clouds, illuminating the ruined village in pale light. Inside the shack, a new storm had begun, one not of rain, wind, or lightning, but of connection, fate, and an unspoken promise that neither could ignore. Alara took a shaky breath, standing facing the creature she had saved. Her mind screamed caution, yet her heart whispered something else entirely. She had lived her life in fear and rejection, but this was different. She did not know what lay ahead, but for the first time she felt as if the storm had brought her to a place she truly belonged. The man-wolf stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. Rain clung to his wet hair, dripping onto the floor, yet he seemed untouched by it, as if he carried his own storm within. What are you?" Alara asked, barely above a whisper. He did not answer immediately. He simply studied her, the intensity of his gaze sending a shiver down her spine. Then finally he spoke, his voice soft but unwavering. "I am bound by the storm, and now, I am bound to you." Alara's pulse raced. She had no idea what that meant, no idea what the future held, yet something in her chest told her that nothing could ever be the same again. The storm outside had passed, but the storm between them, the storm of fate, of destiny, of connection, had only just begun. She swallowed, forcing herself to steady her shaking hands. Her life, rejected and broken as it was, had brought her to this moment. And though she did not know the path ahead, she understood one thing clearly. She could not turn away. Not now. Not ever. The wolf who had stumbled into her life in the dead of night had transformed, and with him so had she. And as dawn broke over the ruined village, a new chapter began, one filled with danger, mystery, and a bond neither could deny. The first light of dawn filtered through the broken roof of the small shack, painting the wet floor with pale gold. Outside, the village lay quiet. The storm reduced to a gentle drizzle, and the scent of rain and damp earth filled the air. Alara sat on a straw mat, staring at the creature she had saved the night before. Only now, in the calm light of day, she could fully see him, not as a wolf, but as something between man and beast. Kalen, she had not yet known his name, stood at the edge of the shelter, massive and tall, his silver eyes glinting like the first frost of winter. Rain clung to his dark hair, water dripping in slow beads onto the wooden floor. Even in his half-human form, there was a raw, dangerous power about him. And yet, beneath it all, she could sense vulnerability, a quiet, aching loneliness that mirrored her own. Alara swallowed hard, her voice trembling. You're not just a wolf." Kalen's gaze softened, just enough to reveal a flicker of emotion. "No," he said quietly. "I am more, and I am bound to the storm." Alara frowned. "Bound to the storm? What does that mean?" He took a slow step toward her, and she instinctively took one back. "I was not always this form," he explained, his voice steady, deep like distant thunder. "I was once human, a prince of a kingdom that no longer exists. A betrayal, a curse. It turned me into a wolf. I cannot leave the forest for long, for my spirit is tied to the shadows of that place." Alara's breath caught. "A prince cursed?" She had heard tales of enchanted beings and ancient magic, but nothing had ever touched her life so directly. She stared at him, curiosity and fear battling in her chest. "Then why are you here? Why did you come to me?" Kalen's silver eyes met hers, and for a long moment neither spoke. Then in a voice that was both commanding and vulnerable, he said, "Because you are like me, rejected, alone, cast out by those who should have protected you. I felt something in the storm, a call I could not ignore. I could not leave it unanswered." Alara's heart thudded. No one had ever spoken to her like that, as if they understood the emptiness she carried. She wanted to turn away, to run, but the weight of his gaze held her still. "You feel it too?" she asked softly. Kalen nodded slowly. "Yes, there is a bond here, whether you wish it or not. Fate has a way of weaving those who are lost into each other's paths." The word sent shivers down Alara's spine. She had spent her life invisible, wandering alone, doubting her own worth. Yet here was a creature, no, a man-wolf, who seemed to recognize her pain as if it were his own. And for the first time she felt seen, truly seen. The silence stretched between them, comfortable yet charged. Outside, the wind rustled through the skeletal trees and the soft murmur of rain tapped against the broken walls. Alara finally broke the stillness. "You're hurt," she said, motioning to the wound along his side that had bled so heavily the night before. "I can help you heal. You don't have to hide it." Kalen's lips pressed into a thin line. "I am not used to being cared for," he admitted. "And I am not used to trusting." Alara hesitated, then met his gaze without flinching. "Neither am I," she said simply. "But maybe we can learn together." For the first time, a faint smile touched his lips, though it was fleeting, almost ghost-like. He stepped closer, and Alara noticed the subtle shift in the air, the tension between them, a current that neither dared name aloud. The wolf in him was still there, beneath the surface, raw and untamed, yet she could feel the human heart beating with it, steady and wary. Hours passed in quiet companionship. Alara worked to clean and rebandage his wound, careful with every movement, her hands gentle but firm. Kalen watched, sometimes flinching when she touched a sensitive spot but never pulling away completely. Slowly they began to communicate, not just in words, but in glances, gestures, and the rhythm of breathing shared in silence. When she finally finished tending the wound, Kalen lowered himself onto the straw beside her, the movement graceful despite his size. His head rested near her shoulder, and Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest she had not expected. "You are different from anyone I have met," he murmured. Alara laughed softly, a sound that startled even her. "I doubt that very much," she said, brushing wet strands of hair from her face. "Most people would have run far from a wolf the size of a horse." Kalen's silver eyes glimmered with something akin to amusement. "Perhaps, but you did not." Their shared quiet stretched into the afternoon. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the forest dripping and fresh, the leaves glistening in muted sunlight. Birds began to emerge cautiously, their tentative songs a gentle contrast to the violent storm of the night before. Yet even in the calm, an unease lingered. Alara sensed it, though she could not yet name it. There was a shadow beyond the trees, something watching, something patient and dangerous. As evening approached, Kalen finally spoke of the curse that bound him. "Long ago," he said, his voice low, almost reverent, "I was betrayed by someone I loved. That act of treachery destroyed my kingdom, my family, everything I held dear. A sorceress, enraged by the fall of my people, cursed me to walk as a wolf until I learned humility and trust, until I understood the true weight of love and loss. I have walked these woods for years, unable to leave, unable to find peace." Alara listened, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The story resonated with her own pain, the sense of being unwanted and cast aside. "I understand," she whispered. "I have felt abandoned, rejected, made to feel less than I am. Maybe we can help each other." Kalen's gaze softened further. "Perhaps," he said, "but the path is not easy. The world does not forgive weakness, and there are those who will come for me, dark forces that will feed on my despair, on my failure. You must be careful." Alara's chest tightened, but she did not flinch. "I have survived storms before," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I will survive this one too. With you." A long silence followed, filled only by the sound of wind through the broken roof and the distant rustle of the forest. Then Kalen shifted slightly, pressing closer to her side, not demanding, not threatening, but seeking connection. Ilara allowed herself to lean into him, her cheek resting against his furred shoulder. The warmth was comforting, a silent reassurance that they were no longer alone. As night fell, the first stars began to pierce the darkening sky, and a quiet peace settled over the shack. Yet beneath that peace, a tension simmered, an unspoken understanding that their bond, however fragile, had drawn attention. Somewhere in the shadows beyond the forest, eyes glinted, and the wind carried a whisper that was neither entirely human nor entirely animal. The storm has brought them together, but all storms end in reckoning. Ilara closed her eyes, letting exhaustion wash over her. Her body was sore, her spirit still fragile, but her heart felt full, in a way it never had before. She had saved him, yes, but he had also saved something in her. The courage to care, to trust, to feel. Kalen stirred beside her, and though he said nothing more that night, his presence spoke volumes. He was strong, and yet he was wary, proud and yet vulnerable, dangerous and yet loyal. In the quiet darkness, she realized that she had found not just a companion, but a kindred spirit. The night stretched long and silent, but Ilara did not fear it. She had survived the storm outside, and now she would endure the storm within. The bond between them, fragile yet undeniable, was only just beginning. And though neither of them knew what trials awaited, one truth was clear. The wolf who had staggered into her life was never leaving. The morning sun struggled to pierce the heavy canopy of the forest, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the ground. The village behind Ilara and Kalen was silent, abandoned, a ruin soaked with rain and memories. They had spent the night in quiet companionship, and yet the sense of unease lingered, threading through the air like an invisible current. Ilara rose first, stretching stiff limbs, and glanced at Kalen. He was already awake, sitting near the edge of the shack, his silver eyes scanning the forest with a vigilance that made her heart beat faster. Even in human form, he moved with the grace and precision of a predator. But there was a weight in his gaze, a sorrow she could almost touch, a history she wanted to know. "You're quiet this morning," she said softly, breaking the silence. Kalen turned to her, the storm of last night still reflected in his eyes. "I cannot rest easily," he admitted. "There are forces that hunt me, drawn by the remnants of my curse. They will not stop, not until I am bound to them or destroyed." Ilara frowned, stepping closer. "Forces? What kind of forces?" He hesitated, then rose, towering over her. Even standing, his form retained a hint of the wolf, broad shoulders, taut muscles, a presence both terrifying and protective. "A shadow moves through the forest," he said slowly. "A wraith born of darkness and rage. It seeks to consume me, to feed on the despair that has followed me for centuries. I should not have allowed you to see me vulnerable." Ilara placed a hand on his arm, steadying him, steadying herself. "Vulnerable is not weakness," she said. "I've been rejected all my life. I know what it is to feel powerless. Maybe we can face it together." Kalen studied her for a long moment. His silver eyes searched hers, reading the truth in her words, the quiet strength she carried beneath her weariness. He had walked alone for so long, haunted by guilt and cursed by betrayal that trust was foreign. And yet he felt it, a tether pulling him toward her, one he could neither deny nor resist. "Very well," he said finally, his voice low but steady. "But you must understand, you are not merely helping me. You are entwined with my fate now. Whatever comes, it comes for both of us." Ilara nodded. Her heart pounded, a mix of fear and exhilaration. She had survived storms before, yes, but never one like this. One that spoke of destiny, of danger, of something larger than herself. And yet, despite the danger, there was a thrill in standing beside him. Somehow she knew that if she wavered, both their lives might be lost. They ventured into the forest cautiously, the wet ground soft beneath their feet. Kalen moved ahead, alert to every sound, every flicker of movement. Ilara followed, trusting in his guidance, yet aware that she had to remain vigilant. The forest seemed alive, breathing, whispering secrets in a language she could not understand. Birds fluttered, shadows shifted, and the faint rustle of leaves hinted at creatures watching them from the darkness. After hours of walking, they came to a clearing where the light broke through in shards, illuminating the ruins of a small temple. Vines clung to broken stone and the air thrummed with a quiet, ancient magic. Kalen halted, his gaze sharp. This place, he murmured, is tied to my past, to the curse that binds me. Ilara stepped closer, intrigued despite the unease gnawing at her. Your past? You've never told me much. What happened here? Kalen's shoulders slumped and he sat on a fractured stone pillar, head bowed. Long ago, before I became this? He gestured vaguely to his wolf-like form. I ruled a kingdom. I was young, proud, and foolish. I trusted someone I should not have, and that trust destroyed everything. My people, my family, my future, all lost. The sorceress who cursed me claimed it was punishment for my arrogance. She said only humility and true connection could break it. Ilara listened, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She had never seen anyone speak with such raw honesty about their pain. His sorrow was tangible, pressing against her chest, yet it was not entirely despair. There was a flicker of hope, fragile but present, as if sharing it with her lightened the weight. Maybe that is why you came to me, she said softly. Because you sensed someone who understands loss, someone who has known rejection. Kalen's eyes met hers, intense and searching. Perhaps fate has woven our paths together, but the curse is not merely a memory or a wound. It is alive, and it draws predators, dark entities that sense weakness and fear. The wraith has been following me, waiting, watching, and now it knows I am not alone. A chill ran down Ilara's spine. Then we must be careful, she said, her voice steady despite the unease. We face it together. He inclined his head, and for a moment the predator in him softened. You do not understand what you offer me, he said quietly. To trust, to care, it is dangerous. The wraith can sense attachments, and it will use them. You may be in greater danger than you realize. Ilara did not flinch. I've lived with danger all my life, she said. But I've never felt this connection. Whatever comes, I will not turn away. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the clearing. Kalen shifted, moving closer to her, his presence a shield against the approaching darkness. The air was thick with tension, a mixture of fear, longing, and unspoken understanding. Both of them were aware of the invisible bond growing stronger, a force that tied their fates together in ways neither could fully comprehend. Night fell, and with it came the whispers. From the edge of the clearing, shadows moved, twisting and coiling like living smoke. The wraith had arrived. Its presence was heavy, pressing down on the earth, filling the forest with a chill that reached into their bones. Ilara shivered, though not from cold, and Kalen's stance shifted, protective and alert. It's here, he said softly, his eyes narrowing. Stay close to me. Do not let fear control you. The shadows shifted again, forming a shape both terrifying and incomprehensible. It was neither wolf nor human, neither living nor dead. Its eyes glowed with malice, its form flickering as if the darkness itself could not hold it steady. The wraith advanced, a predator drawn by centuries of sorrow and rage. Ilara's pulse raced, yet she did not retreat. She stood beside Kalen, feeling the warmth of his presence, the steady strength he exuded. He shifted into wolf form, muscles coiling, silver eyes blazing, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. You are not alone, Kalen murmured, his voice both human and beast. I will protect you. Ilara nodded, her fear tempered by the trust she had begun to place in him. And I will stand with you, she said. The wraith hesitated, sensing the bond between them, a force it could not break. Its form flickered, angry and unstable. Kalen bared his teeth, low growls rolling like distant thunder, and the forest seemed to echo with the tension. Ilara's hands trembled, but she did not falter. She felt the connection, the unspoken promise, and for the first time a fierce courage surged through her. The night stretched long, each second heavy with anticipation. Neither moved, waiting, measuring, understanding that the first strike could come at any moment. The wraith's shadows twisted closer and Kalen's fur bristled, his form trembling with power restrained only by will. Ilara swallowed hard, her breath visible in the cold night air. Kalen, she whispered, whatever happens, we face it together. No matter what. Kalen's silver eyes softened, and for a brief, fleeting moment, the predator and the man merged into one, a being capable of immense power, yet bound by the quiet humanity he had rediscovered in her presence. Together, he echoed, and the words carried through the forest like a vow. And then, without warning, the wraith surged forward, darkness spreading across the ground like ink in water. Its shadowy tendrils reached for them, hungry, relentless, and the forest seemed to grow darker with every heartbeat. Ilara's hand found Kalen's, gripping tightly, She felt the strength in his fingers, the warmth of his body, the unspoken promise that they would not face this alone. His growl resonated through her chest, vibrating with power and purpose, and together they faced the night, ready to meet the darkness that had haunted him for centuries. The wraith paused, sensing the bond, hesitating, but only for a moment. It was patient. It would not retreat. Alara's heart pounded, but she did not let fear take her. She met Kalen's gaze, and in that moment she knew that whatever the darkness brought, they would face it as one. The forest was alive with shadows and whispers as night deepened. Every tree seemed to lean closer, their branches reaching like skeletal fingers toward the clearing where Alara and Kalen faced the wraith. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and fear. The dark entity hovered at the edges, its form shifting, intangible yet malevolent. It moved as if it were part of the forest itself, a living shadow drawn by centuries of pain and magic. Kalen crouched low, muscles coiled, silver eyes gleaming. His wolf form was dominant, yet every now and then human features peeked through, hands clenched, jaw tense, shoulders squared. The wraith's presence weighed down on him, stirring memories he had tried to bury, a kingdom lost, a family betrayed, a curse that had followed him for lifetimes. And now Alara stood beside him, a fragile yet unyielding force binding his heart in ways even he could not name. Alara's pulse raced, but she did not flinch. She had survived storms and rejection, but this was something different. She felt the weight of the forest, the tension in the air, and the pull of destiny pressing on her chest. Every instinct told her to run, yet she stood firm. She trusted Kalen. They had faced fear together before, and though this darkness was greater than any they had known, she would not leave him. The wraith moved closer, tendrils of shadow stretching like black water toward them. Its form pulsed with a hatred that was almost tangible, and the forest seemed to shiver at its approach. Kalen growled low in his throat, the sound vibrating through the clearing. "It senses you," he said quietly to Alara. "Do not let it see your fear. It feeds on weakness." Alara took a deep breath, steadying herself. She nodded, gripping a fallen branch for balance. Her hands were trembling, but her resolve was strong. "I'm not afraid," she whispered. "Not while you're here." Kalen's eyes softened just for a fraction of a moment, and the human part of him showed in the subtle relaxation of his shoulders. Then the wraith struck, lunging forward in a swirl of shadow. Kalen leapt to meet it, claws slashing through darkness, fangs bared, and the forest seemed to hold its breath as the first collision shook the earth. Alara ducked instinctively, feeling the surge of power radiate from him. He was not just a wolf. He was a force of nature, a being forged from strength, pride, and centuries of survival. Yet she could see the strain in his eyes, the tension in his body. Even someone as powerful as Kalen could not fight alone against this darkness. She stepped closer, her courage building. "Kalen, we can do this together!" she called, raising her hands, not in attack, but in connection. She focused on the bond that had grown between them, the unspoken thread that tied their fates. The wraith hesitated, recoiling slightly, as if it could sense the unity forming between them. Kalen glanced at her, a flicker of surprise in his silver eyes. "What are you doing?" he asked, even as he continued to strike at the shadows. "Helping you," she said simply, with trust. "With us." It was strange, almost magical. The moment she reached out, the forest seemed to respond. Light glimmered faintly through the trees, breaking the oppressive darkness. The wraith shrieked, recoiling as if pained by their combined presence. Alara felt warmth surge through her chest, a power she had not known she possessed, and for the first time she understood part of Kalen's curse. It was not only about him, it was about connection, about courage, about facing despair together. Kalen roared, striking the wraith with renewed strength, his movements precise and furious. His claws tore through shadow, yet he did not let the darkness overwhelm him. Every strike was measured, every growl filled with both power and emotion. And through it all, Alara remained at his side, her presence bolstering him in ways words could not describe. The wraith twisted, a whirl of darkness that reached for Alara, but she stood firm, meeting its gaze with unwavering determination. Her hand brushed Kalen's side as he shifted back toward human form, grounding him, steadying him. Together, they were a force the darkness had not anticipated, a combination of raw power, trust, and courage. Suddenly, the wraith recoiled violently, screaming in a voice that was both many voices and none. It surged forward one last time, tendrils reaching for Kalen's heart. In that instant, Kalen lunged, his human and wolf forms merging seamlessly, and he struck the wraith with everything he had. Shadows screamed, twisting, writhing, and then, silence. The forest fell still. The wraith had vanished, leaving only faint whispers that lingered in the wind. Ilara and Kalen stood side by side, breathing heavily, bodies tense but alive. The air seemed lighter now, the shadows receding, and for the first time the forest felt almost peaceful. Kalen looked at Ilara, silver eyes filled with something he could not name, gratitude, awe, relief. You are stronger than you know, he said quietly, voice still rough from exertion. Not many could have stood like that, not many could have helped me in a way the curse itself did not anticipate. Ilara smiled weakly, still catching her breath. We helped each other, she said softly. And I think we are stronger together. Kalen's gaze lingered on her, a mixture of pride, admiration, and something more. His curse had bound him to despair for centuries, yet in this moment, a spark of hope ignited, a fragile, precious light that he had not known in lifetimes. He reached out, his hand brushing hers, not commanding, not demanding, simply connecting. Ilara felt a shiver, but it was not fear. It was warmth, trust, and the recognition of a bond deeper than either of them could have anticipated. I don't fully understand you, she admitted, or the curse. But I know one thing. I'm not leaving. Not now, not ever. Kalen's silver eyes softened further, and he let out a breath he had been holding for centuries. Then perhaps there is a chance for both of us. A chance to heal, to be more than what fate has forced us to endure. They walked back to the shack slowly, the forest now calm, bathed in pale moonlight. The battle had ended, but the forest whispered that their trials were far from over. There was more to Kalen's curse, more to the magic that bound him, and more forces in the shadows that would challenge their bond. Yet for the first time neither feared the path ahead. Together they had faced darkness and survived. Together they had discovered strength within themselves and within each other. That night as they rested, Kalen shared more of his past. Stories of a kingdom lost to treachery, of a family he could never forget, of a betrayal that had reshaped his very soul. Ilara listened, absorbing every word, every tremor of emotion in his voice. She realized that the curse was not merely about punishment. It was about understanding, about redemption, about learning to trust and love despite fear. And as they spoke, an unspoken understanding passed between them. Their bond was more than survival. It was connection, a tether of hearts and souls that neither could sever. Each moment together strengthened it, every shared glance, every touch, every breath a thread weaving them closer. Outside, the forest was silent, yet the wind carried a warning. The wraith had retreated, but it had not vanished completely. Somewhere it waited, patient and relentless, ready to strike again, and the night was filled with a quiet tension, the knowledge that their peace was temporary, and that greater challenges lay ahead. Ilara pressed close to Kalen, resting her head against his shoulder. Whatever comes, she whispered, we face it together. I trust you, Kalen. Always. He wrapped an arm around her, protective yet gentle, and for the first time, he allowed himself to feel something he had denied for centuries. Hope. And I trust you, he murmured. You are my strength, and perhaps the key to my freedom. They fell into a restless sleep side by side, hearts beating in unison. The storm of the previous night had passed, but a different storm lingered, one of destiny, of magic, of connection. And as the first hints of dawn touched the ruins of the village, they both knew that the trials ahead would test not only their courage, but the bond that had begun to grow between them, a bond stronger than fear, stronger than despair, stronger than the shadows themselves. Dawn broke over the forest like molten gold, filtering through mist and skeletal branches. The air was thick with expectation, the kind that presses on the chest and quickens the heartbeat. Ilara and Kalen stood at the edge of the clearing, senses alert, hearts synchronized. The shadow they had felt last night had not returned, but something lingered, a tension that vibrated in the soil, in the wind, in the very trees. Kalen shifted, the wolf in him coiling like a spring, ready to strike at the first sign of danger. His silver eyes scanned the forest, muscles tense, ears flicking toward every whisper. Yet despite the vigilance, he allowed a small, rare gesture of trust. He touched Ilara's hand, grounding himself. She squeezed gently, a silent promise that they faced whatever was coming together. "This is it," Kalen murmured, his voice low, a growl threading through it. "The final test. The curse will not relent. Whatever comes next, we must face it without fear." Ilara nodded, her own heart pounding. "We've come this far," she said softly. "Together we can face anything." They stepped into the clearing, the ruins of the old temple bathed in sunlight. Broken stones, moss, and shattered pillars whispered of history and betrayal, of a kingdom lost and a prince undone. Kalen's gaze lingered on the ruins, memories flooding through him, faces of people he had loved and failed, the moment of betrayal that had shattered his world. But this time he did not face it alone. Ilara's presence beside him steadied him, a tether of trust and courage. From the shadows the air thickened, and the wraith emerged, more solid and terrifying than before. Its form pulsed with hatred, shadows flickering like living fire, tendrils twisting toward them. But behind the darkness something else moved, an ancient presence, patient and powerful, the figure that had observed them from the forest edge the night before. Its aura pressed down like a weight, cold and unyielding, yet it did not strike. It waited. Kalen growled, shifting seamlessly between wolf and human form, a storm of power and grace. "It has waited for this moment," he said. "But we are not weak. We are not alone." Ilara felt the bond between them strengthen, a pulse of energy connecting their hearts and minds. She could feel Kalen's strength, his fear, his hope, and her own courage surged in response. She stepped closer, matching his stance, ready to face whatever came. The wraith lunged first, shadows curling like knives. Kalen moved as one with the forest, striking and evading, silver eyes blazing. Ilara followed, using her presence as a shield, her courage and trust amplifying Kalen's strength. Together they moved in a rhythm, a silent dance of survival and defiance. "This is more than a fight," Kalen said, his voice raw with effort. "It is the test of my heart, of our bond. If we falter, it will consume me and perhaps you." Ilara met his gaze unwavering. "Then we will not falter," she said. "Not together. Not ever." The wraith shrieked, surging forward again, but this time Kalen did not strike alone. Ilara reached out, focusing on the connection between them, drawing strength from the trust and courage that had grown over days of shared struggle. Light seemed to emanate from their bond, faint at first, then stronger, pushing back the shadows. The wraith recoiled, hissing in fury, unable to withstand the force of their unity. Kalen pressed forward, human and wolf forms merging into a being of raw power and will. He struck the wraith with claws and fists, but also with words, incantations whispered from his soul, shaped by centuries of pain, regret, and longing. "Begone!" he roared. "I am not yours to command. You will not feed on me." Ilara added her own voice, steady and unwavering. "You do not control us. We are stronger than fear, stronger than darkness." Their combined defiance created a surge of light, pure and blinding, pushing the shadows back. The wraith writhed, twisting, shrieking, and then with a final violent surge it dissipated into nothingness, leaving only silence and the faint echo of its rage. Kalen collapsed to his knees, exhausted, and Ilara fell beside him, pressing a hand to his shoulder. His silver eyes, still blazing faintly, met hers, and for the first time there was no shadow of fear or doubt. The curse had not only been confronted, it had begun to unravel, weakened by trust, courage, and the bond they shared. "You did it," Ilara whispered, her voice trembling. "We did it. Together." Kalen shook his head slowly, a rare, small smile tugging at his lips. "No," he said softly. "It was you, your courage, your presence. It gave me the strength I did not know I had. The curse may linger, but it no longer controls me." Ilara smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. "Then we are free," she said. "Or at least, freer than before. And whatever comes next, we face it together." Kalen's hand found hers, fingers intertwining, and he pulled her close. For a long moment, they simply held each other, the sun rising higher, the forest alive with the quiet hum of life. Birds sang, leaves rustled, and the air felt lighter, as if the very world acknowledged their triumph. Yet even in this victory, Kalen knew the past could not be erased. Memories of betrayal, loss, and centuries of loneliness remained, but they no longer dictated his path. For the first time he had someone beside him, someone who understood, who trusted, who cared. And that was more powerful than any curse, more enduring than any shadow. "I should tell you everything," Kalen said, his voice quiet, almost reverent. "The kingdom I lost, the family I failed, the mistakes that shaped me. You deserve to know the truth." Elara nodded, brushing her hand along his arm. "I want to know," she said simply, "but not to judge you, only to understand you, and to walk beside you as you heal." Kalen looked at her, and in that gaze, centuries of pain and longing melted into something new: hope, trust, and the beginnings of love. He had wandered alone for lifetimes, haunted by failure and despair, but now he had found someone who anchored him, who mirrored his strength and courage. Together, they walked through the forest side by side, each step lighter than the last. The storm had passed, both outside and within, and though the world was still vast and uncertain, they faced it with unspoken confidence. The bond between them was no longer fragile. It was a force that neither darkness nor fear could sever. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and crimson, Kalen and Elara reached the ruins of the old kingdom. The stones, broken and weathered, whispered of the past, but also of new beginnings. Kalen paused, looking at the ruins with a mixture of sorrow and reverence. "I will rebuild," he said softly. "Not the kingdom as it was, but a new one shaped by trust, courage, and perhaps love." Elara smiled, resting her hand on his. "And I will be here," she said. "Not as a shadow of the past, but as a partner in whatever comes next." Kalen's silver eyes glimmered in the fading light, reflecting not just the sunset, but the bond they shared, the courage they had discovered together, and the freedom that came from facing fear without turning away. The wind carried the faint whisper of the forest, a gentle acknowledgement of their triumph. The curse, the shadows, the wraith, they had faced it all and survived. And in the heart of the storm, they had discovered something greater: trust, redemption, and the possibility of love born from hardship and shared struggle. Elara rested her head against Kalen's shoulder as they stood among the ruins, the forest alive around them. "I never imagined," she murmured, "that something like this, someone like you, could exist in my life." Kalen's hand rested over hers, warm and steady. "And I never imagined," he said, "that someone could see me, truly see me, and choose to stay." They remained like that, silent and strong, as the first stars began to shimmer in the twilight sky. The forest was calm now, the shadows retreating, and the future stretched before them, uncertain but bright. Whatever trials lay ahead, they would face them together, bound by courage, trust, and the bond that had begun in a storm and would endure beyond it.